Maybe this is the most uncomfortable truth a man can hear. The woman who desires you intensely won't always be the same one willing to walk beside you while you build something greater than her. And it's right there, at that exact point, that the silent collapse of many men begins. Men who dared to be great. Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the most legendary names in history, knew this. He didn't read it in a book. He lived it. He was loved with intensity and betrayed with coldness. Not because he was weak, but because he was too great. In this video, we're going to stare straight at a brutal truth. Most women desire the grand man, but prefer to live with the useful one. And that says a lot about you, about them, and about the silent game behind modern relationships. Sit down, take a deep breath, and be ready to leave this video a different man. It starts like this. You have a dream, a calling. Something inside you burns, consumes you, pushes you forward. Most people won't understand. They don't have to, because your mission is never collective. It's solitary. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for acceptance. Greatness doesn't need to be explained. It asserts itself. And that's terrifying. And along the way, sometimes you meet a woman, one who says, "I admire your strength, your vision, your courage." At first, it feels like you finally found safe harbor, someone who understands the fire you carry. But over time, something shifts. The spark in her eyes fades. Admiration turns into complaints. The magic turns into pressure. You didn't change. You just grew. She wants your presence, not your vision. Your kisses, not your focused silence. She wants you here now, small enough to fit inside the version of love she understands. And that's when many great men shrink themselves, just to fit into the routine of a woman who never wanted an empire. She wanted a nest. She wanted a man to complete her, not one who overflowed. But you weren't born to be tamed, and that's when the tragedy begins. The man who denies his calling to keep a relationship loses both, the mission and the woman, because she no longer admires what he became. And deep down, he knows. He betrayed himself. Napoleon wrote passionate letters. He made his vulnerability clear. While commanding armies, he begged for love. His words to Josephine came from a disarmed soul, a man who, even as he conquered nations, still longed to be seen intimately. "Ever since I left you, I've been constantly sad. My joy is being near you. I'll never stop loving you." Words from an emperor, a military genius, whose heart, in the end, was ignored. Josephine didn't reciprocate with the same intensity. While he fought for the future of France, she entertained others. While he dreamed of the world, she clung to emotional dependency. She didn't betray him out of lack of love, but because she couldn't handle the magnitude of the man he was. He couldn't be tamed, and that threw her off balance. She wanted a man who was present, predictable, shaped by her emotional needs. But Napoleon didn't belong to routine. He was creative chaos, force in motion, and men like that unsettle women who seek comfort over meaning. Josephine loved the romantic Napoleon, but she feared the emperor. She wanted the lover, not the leader of nations. And that's how many relationships disintegrate. Not because the woman is weak, but because deep down, she fears being left behind by a man who flies too high. Here's where we need brutal honesty, raw truth, the kind very few are willing to face. The useful man is the one who fixes things, who shows up, who serves, who fits into her story. He's convenience with a heartbeat. He molds himself, adapts, offers himself. He lives by her calendar, spins, in her world, orients his life around her emotions. He's the nice guy, the good match, the one who pleases, who gives in, who bends not to disturb. And her, she appreciates him, accepts him, tolerates him, but she doesn't desire him, because desire is always tied to mystery, to risk, to the unpredictable. The man who gives too much, reveals too much, too early, who confesses before being truly discovered, loses the magnetism, the tension. Women crave the man who pulls them out of their comfort zone, not the one who kneels before them. The grand man, on the other hand, is the challenger, the one whose life doesn't revolve around pleasing. He has a compass, a cause, a mission, and she desires him, but doesn't know if she can live with him. Desire is one thing, coexistence is another, and that's why so many women choose to live with the useful man while dreaming of the grand one, because the useful one is controllable, the grand one is not. Most men still believe that if they're good enough, she'll stay. But what they don't realize is, many times, it's because they were too good that she leaves. Because they gave themselves away, fully, predictably, with no mystery, no limits. And what's predictable doesn't excite, doesn't seduce, doesn't stir the soul. Love has been rebranded into possession, into emotional control. If you love me, you must always be available. If you love me, you'll make me your top priority. If you love me, you'll change for me. But that's not love. That's control wearing the perfume of affection. Man who truly loves himself can't be possessed. He doesn't belong to anyone. He walks with someone. And when that woman tries to limit him, manipulate him, trim him down, he doesn't argue. He leaves. Because he knows being loved for someone you're not is a kind of death. Greatness is lonely, and for many, threatening. Especially for those taught that love equals predictability. The average woman, raised in a world that told her to chase emotional stability, doesn't see the grand man as just a partner, but as a risk, a cliff edge, an unpredictability that draws her in and terrifies her all at once. She may admire him, desire him, idealize him, but when she realizes she can't control him, can't reduce him to a domesticated role, something inside her recoils. And that's when the sabotage begins. Not always consciously, but through small crises, small emotional demands, small requests for attention, for presence, for adaptation. Her fear isn't of the man, it's of what he represents. Freedom. A man who doesn't need to be chosen to know who he is, who doesn't rely on her love to live his mission, is a man who could walk away at any moment, and that is unbearable for someone who was raised to find purpose in being needed. That's why so many of these men are discarded, sabotaged, emotionally minimized, because their greatness highlights the mediocrity of ordinary routines. And not everyone is ready to live beside someone who doesn't fit into the normal world. She wants the myth, but fears the man behind the myth. Because the real man is free, and his freedom exposes her emotional prisons. No betrayal cuts deeper than the one disguised as coldness, as distance, as emotional silence. Many men, by refusing to shrink themselves into mediocre relationships, end up paying the price of emotional isolation. The woman doesn't accuse, doesn't shout, doesn't leave. She simply goes cold. She distances herself without moving away. She looks, but no longer sees. She listens, but no longer hears. And that breaks a man from the inside in a way that's silent and cruel. Because he's still there, but it's as if he's invisible. That silence is the secret code of modern rejection. No fights, no arguments, just a slow, progressive disinterest, a disguised surrender, hidden behind daily routine. And the cruelest part? This indifference often doesn't come because he failed. It comes because he grew, because he didn't become a servant, because he dared to remain who he is. The man who refuses to shrink himself creates unrest in the woman who isn't ready to love a free man. And when she realizes she can't mold him, she responds with coldness, with emotional absence, with silence. Not out of vengeance, but as defense. She's facing something she can't understand or control. And since she can't love without control, she pulls back. That's when many men fall apart, because they've been trained to fight criticism, but not to handle indifference. They were prepared for war, but not for the void, and in that moment, a choice appears. Bow down to win back the affection that once admired you, or stand tall, even if it means standing alone. Most give in, most step back. They become useful just to remain loved, but the man who understands the value of his emotional freedom would rather face the silence of truth than live beside the illusion of love. Every man, at some point in life, will stand at this silent crossroads. Will he become the man who builds a home to please a woman, or the man who builds a legacy that challenges the world? Make no mistake, both paths come with a price. The man who chooses the nest often feels loved, but underused, comfortable, at peace, but with a growing silence inside. Because every great man knows, deep down, he wasn't born for a life of pleasing. The man who chooses the empire, however, lives on the other edge. He wakes up with solitude as his companion, with misunderstanding as a frequent visitor. He's not loved by all, but he's remembered. He's not embraced, but he's respected. And above all, he respects himself. He looks in the mirror with pride, even when the world turns away, because he didn't betray his mission. He didn't abandon his calling, He didn't give up his greatness just to be accepted. That's the man who chooses himself, who doesn't beg for love, who doesn't trade identity for affection, who knows not every woman can walk beside a man on the rise. And that's okay. It's not about rejecting love. It's about recognizing that some loves only survive when you're small, and that to grow, you'll have to let those loves go. Between the nest and the empire, the man who chooses himself is the one who understands. The world doesn't need more nice guys. It needs more whole men. There is a kind of loneliness that destroys, but there's another that builds. The man who chooses himself, who keeps walking even when it costs him emotional comfort, will inevitably face this kind of solitude. But it's different. It's not a prison. It's a temple. In this sacred silence where there are no fake caresses or hollow words, he finds something rare. Clarity. Clarity about who he is, about what he wants, about what he no longer accepts. He realizes he was trained to please, to serve, to adapt, but his soul was built for something else, expansion. And so, he begins to build a vision, a legacy, an empire, not on the outside but within. Along the way, he loses people, memories, promises, but he gains something greater, himself, chosen. Solitude is not sadness, it is maturity. It is the decision to walk alone for a while, so that you'll never again have to lose yourself just to be loved. And little by little, something changes. Because once a man becomes whole in his own presence, he starts attracting different women. Women who don't want a servant, who don't want a moldable puppet, who don't want a good match. They want a partner, a man who doesn't need them to feel alive. And that's where the cycle comes full circle. Because the man who was once silenced for being too much is now heard because of it. That's the legacy of chosen solitude. A man who no longer betrays himself, who doesn't sell out, who doesn't beg, who doesn't trade his greatness for scraps of acceptance. He walks forward, and the world around him learns. He didn't come to please. He came to transform. Now, look at yourself. How many times have you silenced your voice just to keep a relationship? How many times have you made yourself smaller to be accepted? How many times have you betrayed yourself to stay close to someone who could never walk beside your greatness? This video isn't an attack on women, and it's not blind praise for men. It's an invitation, a mirror, a call to return to yourself. To remember who you were before being domesticated by other people's expectations. Before you became useful, convenient, acceptable. Men like Napoleon weren't perfect. They were human, but they were loyal to one thing, their destiny. And you, will you live just to be tolerated, as long as you follow the script of a socially acceptable relationship? Or will you dare to be remembered? Remembered for your courage to stand tall, for your uncomfortable greatness, for your vision that doesn't fit in small boxes. The choice is yours, but never forget, the woman who truly loves you will grow beside you. She won't ask you to shrink to fit into her story, and if she's not ready, that's okay. Keep going. Walk. Build. Because you weren't born to be loved by everyone. You were born to fulfill your mission, and when you live with that truth, the right kind of love arrives, without pressure, without weight, without conditions. Remember, you were not made to be tolerated. You were made to be remembered. If this message spoke to you, like the video, share it with men who need to wake up. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more truth, freedom, and greatness. We'll see you in the next video.